FM Rewind. VOW 88.1. Your mid-mornings done right with the A-Team. Area code.
And this time around, we'll be speaking to Jonathan van der Walt. He is from the Legal Resource Centre. And what we'll be unpacking is a very critical issue that we've been dealing with for the past few weeks here in Gauteng, but it's been an ongoing problem. Now, State Capture and Beyond campaign, they've released a very groundbreaking water justice opinion piece, which was published on the 9th of July. And the State Capture and Beyond campaign. It's a collaborative initiative of the Human Rights Media Trust, the Legal Resource Centre, as well as the Brood vir de Walt, and co-founded by the EU, has released a critical new op-ed titled Shallow and Transformative Water Justice. Now, it exposes deep structural failures in South Africa's water governance system. Now, this opinion piece introduces and supports the launch of the State Capture and Beyond campaign's new water justice report, and highlights the growing disconnect between the constitutional right to have water and the lived reality of millions across the nation who face dry taps, and they face unsafe sanitation and long-term dependence on water tankers. While policy frameworks offer the appearance of justice, these approaches remain very superficial. They fail to confront entrenched corruption, decaying infrastructure, and institutional interior. Key insights include that 25 litres per person daily allocation, this has been unchanged since 2009, is insufficient for hygiene, health, as well as dignity. Temporary solutions like VIP toilets and tankers divert long-term investment, and of course, a lack of meaningful progress. It undermines the constitutional promise of access to water and human dignity. A very good morning to you, Mr. van der Walt, and thank you for joining us here in Area Code.
Good morning to you. Thank you for inviting me.
Let's get into it. How does this report fit into the broader goals of the State Capture and Beyond campaign?
Well, the State Capture and Beyond campaign is trying to highlight the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. It was a massive undertaking, very expensive, and highlighted a lot of corruption that has these long-lasting effects, one of which is on water. If we hadn't have lost so much money in State Capture, there would be, well, hopefully plenty to spend on maintenance and upgrading water systems to ensure that everybody has access to water. So we're trying to keep that in mind, keep that in the people's minds, that we need to focus on corruption and address it and advocate for change and improvement.
Of course, your report criticizes South Africa's water governance as structurally flawed. Just unpack what those structural issues are and what they look like on a daily.
Well, you highlighted one of them, which is that regulation on the water supply. That the government said, we want to make sure that everybody has access to water. We're going to give them 25 litres a day as the basic minimum. But that minimum sort of ignores what the actual needs of people are. And if we keep to that minimum without increasing it, which it hasn't increased in over a decade now, people are going to struggle. And if people don't have water, that's all they're going to think about. If you don't have water, you're desperate, you're dying.
So you mentioned that the water crisis is more than a technical failure, it's political. What roles has State Capture played in worsening the situation? We do know in the Eastern Cape there's water tanker mafias, but on a broader level, how has the government interfered in ensuring that citizens get the water that they deserve and they need all so much?
The big problem there is usually with the management side of things. So South Africa is a water-scarce country, which means that careful management of water is just absolutely essential. We can't manage without government taking care of the big systems. And if we have leaders in place who lack the knowledge, or they deployed because of political reasons rather than skill or professionalism, it's going to affect the whole system from the top down. If you don't have effective leaders pushing for change and making sure that all the employees are working towards service delivery, that service delivery is going to start failing. And then it combines with another issue of maintenance is not really a very attractive task. If you build a new bridge, you can open the bridge and say, look, we've built this fantastic bridge, we've connected communities. But maintenance doesn't really have that show off. You can't really show off maintenance that easily.
Yes.
It doesn't have a lot of political power to it. And those issues sort of combine to lead to the situation where maintenance falls away and people don't receive their basic services.
Before we get into how the 25-litre daily water allocation hasn't changed from 2009, would you be able to give us insight as to how they came about to 25 litres per day allocated to an individual is more than sufficient, and why hasn't it changed years later?
Well, it actually works quite well as a very sort of survival minimum. A person, I think, needs around 2 to 4 litres of water replacement, depending on their age, gender, and a variety of factors like whether they work outside. So that 5 litres goes to just drinking and, replacing the water lost. And then you have things like hand washing. You can technically wash hands sufficiently with about 500 mils or half a litre of water. And then you need to wash hands sort of every time you go to the bathroom, when you're eating, a variety of reasons. That uses sort of 5 to 10 litres. And then washing in a basin can take about 5 to 10 litres as well. So there are methods to keep your water usage below 25 litres, but it takes someone who's very dedicated to keeping their water use very low. And I think it's unreasonable to expect everybody to be able to do that unless they're in like an emergency situation.
Exactly. It feels like that's what we're doing in the past few weeks. We didn't have water in the city of Johannesburg, well, some parts of it, and it feels like that 25 litre is exactly what we went through. It's very limited. You have to be very strategic as to how you're going to use the water that you have. So it's about time that these reforms are revisited and amendments are made. We're still in conversation with Jonathan van der Walt, and he's from the Legal Resource Centre. And what they've done, they have put together a piece of state capture and beyond campaign about groundbreaking water justice opinion piece. Now they detail about how shallow and transformative water justice and how it needs to change, and how deep structural failures in South Africa's water governance system need to be exposed, and most importantly, they need to be addressed. Now, before the news headlines, we're talking about how 25 litres of water is the daily allocation for an individual, and how that has been the way from 2009, but there have been calls for this number to be adjusted, and he was basically unpacking that it's basically possible, but honestly, it's a very restrictive number, and one needs to have a free-flowing supply of water. Mr. Jonathan, you have highlighted a disconnect between constitutional right to have water and the lived experience. What do people on the ground say about this reality?
Well, as far as the people on the ground want a higher water allocation. There are just so many needs for water, and 25 litres doesn't allow for it. I think one of the examples I gave is that people should have a vegetable garden in their backyard to provide extra nutrients as a vital thing. But with 25 litres, what water is going to go to watering those plants? Or what water is going to go to making sure the hygiene standards improve to a point where people have improved health?
Of course. And how does the failure of water access intersect with other rights, like the right to education, the right to health, and the right to housing?
Well, with education, there's a fairly direct overlap. If you're worried about water and where your next source of water is going to be, you can't really concentrate on what you're learning. It's the same with if there's a lack of food. If you're starving and all you're thinking about is food, you're not thinking about what you're learning in class. Housing, if I jump then, is meant to be a situation that allows access to services. If you've got a house that is formalized, you've got a system in place that will provide water, electricity, waste removal, both liquid and solid. And housing provides like a hub for all those aspects to come together, which is why housing is so important. And through those methods, it allows people to focus beyond their basic physiological needs to self-improvement, on education, on finding a better job, and moving out of the lowest situation, if I put it that way.
Mr. van der Walt, our last two questions before we wrap up this very important conversation. The report critiques VIP toilets as well as water tankers as temporary solutions, and those have become permanent across various settlements, be it whether informal or townships. You see what was supposed to be a project that was supposed to sustain a community for an X amount of months has now become the permanent fix. What are the risks of these measures that have been put in place in terms of making this the permanent way in terms of VIP toilets?
Unfortunately, the number of risks is immense. Because there's first this problem of if you're taking in water, it's not always checked to the standards properly. So I've heard reports from people living in communities that sometimes the JoJo tanks are dirty, or an animal will get inside and die, and that water becomes contaminated and unhealthy. And with the VIPs, the issue is more a funding thing. So VIPs, which are still pit latrines, are made to replace pit latrines that are outright dangerous.
Yes.
The number of children who have died in pit latrines is horrifying. But they need this constant maintenance. They need people to come in, pump out the pit latrine, clean it, maintain it, which is expensive. And then you also need education on how to use a pit latrine. Unlike a water flush system, where you kind of flush and you clean the toilet, and that's sort of the end of your worries unless there's a clog. A VIP, you need to, I think, put down lime, make sure it stays healthy and prevents a buildup of harmful bacteria.
Yeah, and as we wrap up our conversation, why do these short-term fixes continue to receive investment despite their ineffectiveness? As well as, is it about procurement or is it about corruption?
I think it's a bit of both. It tends to be that these solutions are cheap, they're quick, and they're easy.
Yeah.
So a VIP toilet is a lot cheaper to put in than a flush toilet, because a flush toilet then needs a whole water reticulation system underground to be able to move the water in and move the waste out. And then also sort of managing waste at big wastewater treatment facilities. It takes a lot of time and effort and physical willpower to get it going. Whereas a VIP, as long as the soil is solid enough, you can put in a VIP. And then it's done, and you can sort of forget about it until a month down the line you need to do maintenance.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. van der Walt. That was Jonathan van der Walt, and he's from the Legal Resource Centre, and we were discussing very shallow and transformative water justice. It was a piece that was brought together by the Human Rights Media Trust as well as the Legal Resource Centre, not forgetting the State Capture and Beyond campaign, a collaborative initiative that brings to our attention as the public about water injustices that have been taking place across the nation. We have people who have not had access to water for years on end, and just right now, as we concluded our conversation, we were talking about how pit latrines have been something that communities have been battling for decades on end, and governments have put in place VIP toilets instead of having a flush system that they deserve and that they need. And we really need to get to the bottom of this corruption, because honestly, it's not sustainable to have people and their human rights tampered and denied on this scale and level like it has been across various communities in South Africa who have not necessarily had the voice that they need in order for things to be changed and for things to be implemented and for them to get the justice that they deserve. Water is a human right, and it ought to be delivered in an orderly manner. And what we've been witnessing over the past few years is incredibly heartbreaking, and we really do hope that of all the human rights services and service delivery that has not been carried out, water, safe access to water, clean water, running taps is something that people will get in the years to come.
Area Code weekdays
9 a.m. to 12 p.m.
FM Rewind VOW 88.1.